let's get to your singing a little bit. Now, I know you
Okay.
like doing it. You go up and you play. I see you do your post and you pick up songs. Obviously, you're the
Yeah.
crooner. Obviously, you love Frank, Dean, Sammy, Bobby, Darin, all those
Yeah.
greats. What makes you? Why that, Lou? Did you grow up into that? Was that music all around you? Was your family musical family? How did that work?
Yeah. Well, let me open up by just telling you that when I was probably 6 or 7 years old, I actually thought Frankie Valli was in my family. I thought he was one of my uncles. I mean, we had this music on all the time, and it includes Dean and Frank, but I mean Frankie Valli back then. I mean, my family was really into that, and back in the days, like I said, Cicero and Roosevelt and Austin area back then, that was a pretty happening time. My grandfather was a real musical person. He loved music. I never met my mother's father, on my mom's side, who I'm speaking about. His name was Frank Caruso. My grandfather died right after my mom and dad got married. But, you hear all these things from my grandmother and my mom and other people that loved him and knew him. And he was very, he loved music. He loved Dinah Washington. He loved, Pearl. He loved, all the greats, Ella, Frank, especially a lot of the lady blues singers,
Sure.
So I think I got a little bit of that. And I can tell you how it kind of evolved in my life was my uncle, Frankie, who was the son of my grandfather, my mother's younger brother. He was a kind of a teenager when I was a little kid, lived with my grandmother at the time, and he loved to sing. I mean, he'd take out that spool of thread my grandmother had in her little box, the grandmothers always had a shoe box with spools of thread and and bills, and then of course sometimes cash. He'd take the spool of thread out and he'd pretend like he's singing in front of me and my sister when we were little. So we used to do the same thing. So I grew up with Paul Anka. I grew up with Frankie Valli, lots and lots of doo-wops. Dion I thought was related to me, but really Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons and all the doo-wops came out of that. And then a little later when I was about 12, 13, I started really, really appreciating the standards, Sinatra, Jimmy Roselli, one of my favorites, Italian singers, Napolitan singer, Jerry Vale, all those guys. But really Frank, Dino, Sammy. And I've always sang, but I never was a singer. I don't think I'm good or nothing like that. But I'll tell you what, I've got a romantic passion for it, kind of a love affair. Grew up doing it, having fun, never really in front of people. But once I hit 50 years old, I'm 55 now, going on 56. But once I hit 50, I just want to tell everybody out there, everything came kind of loose. I didn't care about what people thought. I just want to have a good time. So I have a good time. I enjoy it. And it makes me feel good, and especially now with the way things are nowadays, you need some reason to feel good. And music always changes the mood. You could be in a bad mood about something. You could be in your car, hear a great song, and tell you it changes you. It really does. It's a kind of a spiritual changing. So I love it.
And it's very important, like you're saying. Half the time, I truly believe that people have that talent, and sometimes they're just afraid to get up and show it and sing in front of people. And
that's for sure.
And I've always said that. I end my show with it all the time. The worst thing in life is wasted talent. And you have a talent not only for your singing, what you do, but also for your business that you do. Why do you think the Rat Pack was still so crazy right now? People still love these three guys. Not only the clothes and the attitude, the music. Why do you think, especially, obviously with Italians, we grew up with that type of music. My parents are more a Dean Martin fan than Frank Sinatra. And you get a lot of that. People think Frank. No. A lot of guys like Dean. And they like Jimmy Roselli. And of course, Jimmy Roselli would have been a hell of a bigger singer if it wasn't for him to screw over Frank, When Frank asked him to go visit his mom in the hospital, and he said, well, I don't know, I might not be able to make it. Oh, really? Whatever happened to Jimmy Roselli? Same thing with Al Martino, when Frank said, hey, don't do the part in The Godfather. And he did it anyway. And Frank banned Al Martino in the United States for numbers of years. He had to play in Europe because Frank put a kibosh to that. So, but everybody loves Dean Martin. But why do you think, Lou, they're so irrelevant even today?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm a big Rat Pack fan, as you probably already know, and I know you are for sure. I used to watch you before you even knew me. I used to come watch your shows. But anyway, I think in a couple different ways. I think that Dean Martin, for whatever reason, the whole generation grew up with Jerry and Dean, and not only that, Dean was just such a natural. I mean, you've heard stories about this. Dean was like God. I mean, in the singing industry, he can get up there and just. I mean, that's a talent right there. He was just born with it. And Dean didn't need to feel like he needed to prove anything either, because he just did what he did. And I think a lot of men, and especially women, love Dean.
Yeah.
With Frank, and I think Dean resonates that way. And I
Sure.
think to the next generation, we've taught our children and listen, compared to some of the music today, I mean, this music is going to live on forever. It's Americana. It's 20th century America.
Yes.
So it brings you to a happy place. I mean, the movies use these songs in all these movies. There's a reason for that. They're not using some of the others. They're using this, 20th century standards. With Frank, I have noticed, this is only my opinion. I'm a big Frank fan. I'm a big Dino fan. I like them both differently for different reasons. I think with Frank, a lot of women don't like Frank. I mean, a lot of women did like Frank when he was younger. I mean, I'm not talking about the attraction of that. But a lot of women, they're like, you know what? I like Dean Martin better than Frank. Well, it's apples and oranges. I think with Frank, he resonates a lot to men in a lot of ways because of the comeback, because of the life story. And I think Sinatra, he embellished that in his attitude, his mannerism, of course, the connections and all those other things too. Kind of has a little bit of a masculine attraction to it. And Frank took the bull by the horn, and Frank was the chairman of the board. He was running things like you were just talking about earlier. Not that was the right thing to do with Jimmy or Al, but there was power there. And they say people who've seen Frank or met him, when he walked in a room, it was like, I heard stories about Frank walking into the Giannotti's back in 1960s,
Sure.
and Frank was in town. He'd go visit Vic, and he'd walk in there, and it was like the Red Sea was parting, and he looked. I've heard this from several people that were different instances, different occasions. He was immaculate. Suit was immaculate. It was like he almost glowed, in a sense. He's Hollywood, and I think he commanded his presence, Whereas Dino kind of, hey man, Dino just wasn't. I mean, you ever heard that interview with Keely Smith? It's fantastic. It's on YouTube somewhere.
Fantastic.
I mean, she talks about all the guys, and boy, that's a great interview. And she's just straight up, Did you ever meet Keely? Probably did.
I met Keely. Yeah, not only did she perform once at Pal Joey's, we brought her in, and we did a couple of things at Milwaukee Festa Italiana, Milwaukee years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, she was fantastic, and just like you're saying about Frank, something that I always heard, that I am good friends with Willie Rizzo, which is Jilly's kid, of course, named after Jilly Rizzo, Sandra's bodyguard. One thing, and then Tom Dreesen did a bunch of shows with him, a great comic who's opened for Frank for many, many years. I think what ended up happening, what Frank used to always, in his concerts, there'd be couples in front of the stage, obviously. He'd look at the women, ignore the gentleman that's sitting there. And it used to get a lot of guys upset, but Dean played it smart. And I learned the exact same thing. I look at the man first, get the man comfortable with you, get the man to say it is, and that's what it is. And Dean Martin's deals with people were with a handshake, Lou. All those television series, everything was a handshake. And here's a perfect story that develops this and ends this little part here. If you think about it, Sinatra was giving Dean Martin a 50th birthday party at his home. It was in Dean's home. And it was a gated community. It was about 10 o'clock. All of a sudden, the cops come to the door, and Frank's going, well, who called? Everybody in the neighborhood's here. Dean called. He was upstairs. He ate. He goes, I fed you. I eaten everybody out of my house, because he wanted to relax, get up early, watch his Westerns, go play golf, and enjoy his day. And that's fantastic.
That's a good story.
Yeah, it's a great story. One other guy we don't talk about too much, and it should be very much talked about, is the great Bobby Darin.
For sure.
I mean, if he has not passed away, Lou, he might have even passed Frank. You know what? I mean, he was just, and when he swung his music, he swung better than Frank did, I thought.
I 100% agreement. As a matter of fact, when I hear music, Like, even in when I try to get up there, if someone lets me get up there, I kind of feel like I need to be more like a Bobby than a Frank. Bobby was an entertainer, and boy, what a talent. Life cut too short. Tragic situation with his personal life, obviously, I think
Sure.
derailed him. Plus the Beatles, 1960s, and things were changing quite a bit. But Bobby Darin would have more than likely been surpassed Sinatra. As a matter of fact, speaking of Sinatra, as you know, he didn't like that comment. I don't believe. I think Bobby
No,
even was young and up and coming and mentioned it. He wants to be bigger than Sinatra. Well, it's a compliment at the time.
it's
But
definitely a compliment. And look, I don't think
yeah, I
Elvis
got
did.
I got Bobby right behind me here. You'll see Bobby behind me
There you
here on a
go.
couple of pictures.
There you go. Nice
But
picture
yeah,
there.
he's fantastic. I love Bobby
And you
Darin.
know what? Frank didn't even like Elvis Presley. He did not like
Right.
Elvis. And the only reason why he had Elvis on his TV show when Elvis came back from the army was because he needed ratings.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Elvis came in. I mean, and that duet goes down in history.
That's a great clip. Isn't that a great
It's a
clip?
great clip. It's a great clip. So it
Yeah,
worked out good. You're
no
watching
doubt.
Ocean Spit, the little show about big things. My good buddy Lou, of course, here from Airtight Windows and a fellow crooner himself. A little time for a quick commercial. Look.